She discovered an amazing opportunity at the CEO's table. What happened next was transformative. Emily Carter's stomach twisted into knots as she read the email from the CEO. "Join us in the boardroom at 10 a.m., it read, a simple directive that ignited a torrent of emotions. This was her chance, the opportunity she had long awaited. But beneath her excitement lay an avalanche of self-doubt. She glanced at her reflection in the office window, tousled hair, a well-worn blouse, and felt like an imposter in her own skin among her impeccably dressed colleagues, each a polished figure of confidence and ambition. The world outside bustled with life, but in her fast-paced corporate office, Emily often felt invisible. Raised on principles of hard work and humility, she had learned to navigate challenges quietly, her brilliance lurking beneath her modest demeanor. A shadow amongst her ambitious peers, she often refrained from contributing ideas, fearing they would be dismissed or overshadowed. Today, however, she couldn't shy away, not when the stakes were so high. As she entered the plush boardroom, the smell of fresh coffee mingled with tension in the air. The sleek conference table shone under bright overhead lights, and the intimidating presence of the executives felt suffocating. Someone had commented earlier that ideas were currency in this room. She clutched the scrap of paper with her thoughts, fighting to quell the storm brewing inside her. She'd been honing an idea. Fear had silenced her, but now it clamored for release. Emily held her breath as the meeting began, a whirl of corporate jargon and strategic discussions flooding her ears. But amid the noise, a spark ignited within her. A stray comment about product innovation sent her mind racing. Suddenly, she saw the gaps they were overlooking, the opportunity to pivot their product line toward an untapped market. Dread crept in as she calculated the implications. Sharing her idea could either catalyze change or lead to her downfall. Before she could gather her bearings, a bombshell revelation ruptured her thoughts. It felt like the floor dropped from beneath her. Her estranged father had once held this very position. Clenching her fists, she wrestled with the weight of a legacy she had only recently begun to unearth. Was this how he felt? Standing on the precipice of ambition, torn between loyalty and the call to innovate? The thought bewildered her. Could she risk rocking the boat that her father had navigated through rough waters? At this moment, the weight of her choices felt immense. The voices around her blurred as a flood of memories surfaced, revisiting family dinners filled with discussions of work, the burdens of unfulfilled dreams, and the praise of her father's contributions. She had always wanted to prove herself, yet here she stood, paralyzed by fear. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With the resonance of her father's career echoing in her mind, Emily stood at a tumultuous crossroads. Her heart raced, muscles tense as the meeting took an awkward pause. The silence mocked her, pricking at her insecurities. Would she crack under the pressure or finally find her voice? Could she embrace the courageous woman she longed to be? As she readied herself to speak, each passing second felt heavy, like the universe holding its breath. In that critical moment, it became abundantly clear this meeting was no ordinary occasion. It could unravel everything that had defined her for so long. She was poised at the edge of transformation, yet gripped by the fear of losing the safety of obscurity or the loyalty of the boss who had overlooked her. What would she choose, and would they finally see her? As Emily opened her mouth, the room watched, holding its breath, and she finally confronted the tempest within. The moment felt suspended in time as all eyes turned toward Emily. The noise of the boardroom dimmed to a whisper in her mind, leaving just the sound of her heartbeat thundering in her ears. She wrestled with the weight of her choice. If she spoke up, she could alter the course of her career and perhaps finally step out from her father's shadow. If she remained silent, the regrets would gnaw at her endlessly and reinforce the belief that she was unworthy of being at the table. Ignoring the clamoring doubts, she inhaled deeply, feeling the air burning in her lungs. "I have an idea," she finally said, forcing the words out like a launching arrow. The simple declaration exposed a vulnerability she had long kept hidden, a yearning for validation and acceptance. The room shifted. Executives who were once focused on their own discussions turned their attention to her, curiosity mingling with skepticism. She grasped the crumpled paper tightly, the ink smudged from her anxious fiddling, and unfolded it with trembling hands. "While discussing our product lines earlier, something struck me," Emily continued with newfound fervor. "We have a unique opportunity to expand into the millennial market by redesigning our offerings to be more sustainable, something that aligns with their values." For a heartbeat, the silence. Then, the murmurs began, a mix of appreciation and skepticism. It was the response that stirred something powerful within her. She pressed on, convincing herself that all the hesitations and fears would not shackle her any longer. "I believe this pivot not only address market demand but could also enhance our brand's reputation, particularly with a demographic driven by social consciousness." As she spoke, memories of familial dinners injected a potent fear but also a reservoir of insight. Her father had spoken about innovation with passion, dreams shining in his eyes. Emily had merely interpreted that as ambition, but now she understood it as a legacy, one that she could shape for herself. Her voice steadied, each word growing in strength, igniting the embers of her hidden capabilities. Yet, in the crowd of executives, she noticed one familiar face: Robert, her immediate supervisor, the very man whose approval had once felt like an impenetrable fortress. His eyes narrowed, an unspoken challenge brimming between them. Would he support her audacious leap, or would he quietly dismiss her contributions in favor of maintaining the status quo? Uncertainty crept in, but the moment felt too pivotal to retreat. "Might I suggest we consider a feasibility study?" Emily pressed, her voice gaining volume. "Our competitors are already moving in this direction. If we don't act, we'll fall behind." Each sentence was an illustration of her fervor, a gradual reclamation of her voice in a world that often drowned out less assertive opinions. But when the meeting finally concluded, she felt a solitary hollow. Her heart whispered that she had made a step, yet doubt lingered. The approval was there, but might the whispers behind her back linger long after the approval faded? She became acutely aware that even if she won the battle today, she would have to continue proving her worth, defying both the expectations of her superiors and her own ingrained insecurities. As she left the boardroom, Emily caught sight of the familiar skyline outside. It seemed impossibly grand, yet within her swelled a burgeoning confidence that screamed she belonged there, too. But with that realization came another layer of uncertainty. Had she garnered enough trust to face her next challenge? The room still hovered with lingering judgments, but she sensed a shift, an opportunity brimming on the horizon. Just then, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out to see an unexpected message lighting up her screen: "We need to talk, urgent." "It's about your father." The word sent a jolt through her, and an instinctual fear clawed at her heart. What new complexities lay ahead as she faced both her father's legacy and the corporate battlefield she had just begun to navigate? Emily stepped out of the boardroom, a cacophony of thoughts clashing like waves against a rocky shore. The exhilaration from her moment of triumph was rapidly dissipating, leaving behind an erratic heartbeat that echoed with anxiety. What could her father possibly want? The prospect of discussing him wasn't simply daunting. It was charged with an undercurrent of familial expectations, past disappointments, and the heavy weight of legacy. As she walked through the office's vibrant corridors, each step seemed heavier with the realization that her professional existence had just begun a tentative ascent. She had dared to voice her thoughts, and for the first time, she was proud to claim those thoughts had merit. Yet, the impending conversation about her father loomed like a storm cloud, threatening to overshadow her newfound confidence. "Emily!" A voice snapped her from her reverie, and she turned to find Robert standing there, arms crossed, eyes narrowing with palpable scrutiny. "Hey, Robert," she greeted, forcing a smile despite the anxiety swirling within her. "I'd like to discuss your proposal. Catch me later?" "Sure," she replied, her throat tightening. She sensed the balance of power had shifted slightly, yet she felt the need to navigate this new terrain carefully. The door had opened, but would she be able to walk through it without faltering? As she stepped into the elevator, her phone buzzed again. Another message. "Meet me at the cafe on 5th. We need to have this talk." The terse tone twisted her stomach further, each word an additional weight pressing on her consciousness. The cafe was bustling with life as she entered, the aromas of coffee and baked goods intensely alluring yet uninviting in her current state. She spotted her father sitting at a corner table, his expression unreadable. The urgent nature of the message hinted at something serious, but he could also be here on a routine matter. Nonetheless, the familiarity of his presence was both comforting and unsettling. "Emily," he greeted, gesturing for her to sit. "Thank you for coming. What's this about?" she asked, striving to steady her voice. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck as if the motion could alleviate the weight of unspoken truths. "I've received some troubling news regarding the company." Her heart raced. "Is it about the merger?" He shook his head. "No, it's more personal. Your performance at the board meeting caught some attention, but the fear is that it could bring repercussions down on me." The gravity of his words pressed against her chest. "What do you mean?" "I thought the dreams she nurtured, the fresh air of possibility she had breathed in just hours before, had they already begun to suffocate? This company has always been intertwined with our lives. My history in this business comes with challenges I didn't prepare you for," he explained, his tone laden with a mix of regret and concern. "Are you implying I'm the problem?" She couldn't help the heat rising in her voice, anger sprouting even as she advocated for her argument. "I'm just trying to carve out my space, Dad. Trying to prove I can be more than a name." His eyes softened momentarily, revealing a flicker of understanding. "I know that, Emily. I wouldn't want to stifle that spirit. But it is complicated, and you must be cautious. The others, they may not be ready to embrace a shift this drastic." Her thoughts spiraled, a cacophony of doubt filtering through the assertiveness she felt earlier. Would she always be seen as an extension of her father's shadow or to bear its burdens? If she continued on this path, what sacrifices would she have to endure to assert herself? "And you think I should just remain silent? Settle for the status quo?" she challenged, feeling the determination bubbling within her. He hesitated, the moment becoming taut with unprocessed emotions, fears swirling beneath the surface. "No, but sometimes being smart about conflict means standing back to strategically plan your next move." As the lingering silence invited deeper contemplation, the enormity of her journey crystallized in her mind. This moment was not merely about her father but also about her, the choices she had to make within her own sanity and ambitions. "I need to go," Emily declared, standing abruptly. She needed time to think, to unearth the truths buried beneath her father's legacy while forging her path. As she exited the cafe, propelled by a renewed determination, she recognized the truth: she held the power to rewrite her narrative, but daunting choices were ahead. Could she maintain this newfound momentum amidst familial tensions and corporate skepticism? And then a thought struck her: what if this shadow of her father's legacy was precisely the catalyst she needed to push herself even further? With those questions resting her mind, the stakes rose higher as she prepared to face Robert again. The moment she walked into that room would define not just her career but herself. As Emily stepped out of the cafe, the rush of the city washed over her, a stark contrast to the heaviness of the previous conversation. She found herself in a whirlwind of thoughts about her father's warnings, but deeper still was the realization that she could no longer stand in his shadow. If she aimed to carve out her legacy, the encounter with Robert would shape her immediate future. Determined to prepare, she glanced around, searching for a moment of clarity amidst the bustling energy. Every passerby seemed to wear their purpose like armor, and for the first time, she felt exposed. Drawing a deep breath, she steadied herself with the words that had echoed in her mind, "I hold the power to rewrite my narrative." Arriving at her desk, Emily shuffled through her notes from the board meeting, but her focus wavered as she considered her approach with Robert. It was vital she articulated her vision clearly, showcasing her ideas while navigating the political intricacies that lay ahead. A strategy was forming, a calculated execution of confidence paired with humility. Time slipped away, and the moments to meet with Robert tightened like a noose. As she walked toward his office, she thought about her strengths and the unique insights she could offer. The fear her father had imparted was lessened by her growing resolve. Confidence was rising within her, fueled by the thrill of possibility if she could just channel her anxiety into an assertive dialogue. "Emily, come in," Robert's voice brought her back to the present as she stepped over the threshold. He leaned over his desk, his demeanor serious yet inviting, a contrast to the authority he wielded. The air sizzled with anticipation. "Thank you for meeting with me," she began, smoothing her hair instinctively as she chose her words with precision. "I've been reflecting on the proposal I presented and the feedback I've received. There's an opportunity to align our vision more closely with our market goals. You're bringing a fresh perspective, and I recognize that," Robert responded, his gaze fixed intently on hers. "But you understand the stakes, right? There's more than just numbers and statistics. This impacts people. Are you prepared for that?" His question pierced through her burgeoning confidence, reminding her of the complex web she was stepping into. It was one thing to challenge the system, but entirely another to risk the stability of those ensnared within its grasp. The responsibility settled over her like a weight. "I am prepared," she asserted, instinctively straightening her posture, allowing conviction to fuel her conviction. "I believe genuine progress requires challenging the status quo. This merger can amplify our reach if we embrace innovation. I'm committed to that transformation, for both the company and the people involved." Robert leaned back, studying her, and Emily's heart raced as uncertainty intermingled with hope. She sensed he was contemplating her words, weighing the merits of her passion against the backdrop of his experience. "What if this doesn't go as planned?" he finally questioned, his tone softer, yet loaded with concern. "What if your ambition gathers too much attention?" Emily's pulse quickened, yet she stood her ground. The feeling of ownership over her choices invigorated her spirit. "If it doesn't go as planned, then I'll adjust my course. But I believe we can shape the outcome together. It's time to take risks that align with our vision." She felt the shift in the room, an opening, perhaps. Robert looked thoughtful, and for the first time, she sensed the possibility of him becoming an ally rather than solely an obstacle. But then, a fleeting shadow crossed his face, and the tension tightened once more. "I need to discuss this with the others before moving forward on anything formal," he advised cautiously, signaling an impending political battle. "Of course," Emily replied, suppressing disappointment but recognizing this as the step she needed to take. "I'd love to be part of those discussions. Let's not shy from exploring all our options." Leaving his office, she wrestled with a mix of exhilaration and apprehension, aware that the conversation had lifted her slightly from the shadows of her father's legacy but also hurled her into the arena of corporate politics. The stakes had never felt higher, but as determination coursed through her veins, she realized this was not just about a business proposal. It was about asserting her place, not merely as her father's daughter, but as Emily, the one with the audacity to be both an innovator and a leader. As the day waned, she leaned into her discomfort, knowing the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. Would she embrace the consequences of her choices, or would doubt creep back in? Ahead of her lay a pivotal choice, one that could pave the way for her vision or anchor her back into obscurity. What decision would she make when those tensions escalated? The next morning arrived, dim and overcast, as if the sky mirrored Emily's apprehensive mood. She stood in front of her bathroom mirror, scrutinizing her reflection as she adjusted her blouse. Behind her poised exterior lay the persistent thrum of anxiety, Would she be able to navigate the brewing storm of corporate politics that had recently ensnared her? In her mind, she replayed Robert's cautious words, a reminder that her ambition could attract both scrutiny and opposition. Yet, beneath that voice of doubt, another emerged, stronger now. It whispered that real power came from balancing assertiveness with empathy. This wasn't solely about her goals, it was also about others who had invested their hopes in this venture. A tightening in her gut urged her to remember their faces, their dreams tied to the merger. Arriving at the office, Emily paused before entering the building. She inhaled deeply, grounding herself before stepping into the energetic world she was learning to command. Conversations bloomed around her, filled with industry jargon and evaluative projections, but for her, the day held a different significance. It wasn't just a day of meetings, it was a chance to elevate her voice in a context that had often felt chaotic and overwhelming. As she entered the conference room for the scheduled team strategy meeting, she noted Robert's presence, among others, curiosity mingling with existing authority. The executives sat around the expansive table, their expressions a mixture of skepticism and intrigue. Emily felt the intensity ramp up. She took her place at the head of the table, a subtle shift from her previous role. "Thank you all for gathering today," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. "I believe we stand on the brink of a significant opportunity with the proposed merger. I want to present some thoughts that may redefine our approach and bolster not only our market presence but also the relationships we cultivate along the way." An array of eyes fixed on her, the spotlight felt both exhilarating and suffocating. As she outlined her vision, weaving data with emotional intelligence, she scrutinized their reactions. There were nods, raised eyebrows, and the occasional frown of doubt, each response fueling her resolve to deliberate over their concerns. Emily, one of the senior executives, interjected, skepticism wrapping their tone. "I appreciate your passion, but do you truly believe we can shift our entire strategy without significant backlash from our stakeholders? We should tread carefully." Her pulse raced, but she remained composed. While change often breeds contention, it's crucial to foster trust through transparency. "I've witnessed firsthand the fear and uncertainty that accompany inaction. What if we focused on communicating to our stakeholders the inherent benefits that accompany this proposal?" Each word was a deliberate challenge, inviting dialogue rather than closing it down. The meeting morphed into a delicate dance of confrontations and revelations as other executives began to voice their concerns, but she found herself growing adept at navigating the pushback. The robustness of her argument emerged, honed through successive iterations of her ideas, each refinement making her more confident, more assertive. Yet, amidst the lively exchange, she felt a familiar undercurrent, a sense of apprehension that gnawed at her foundation. Achieving consensus felt like an impossible climb, and the disapproval from some of her peers threatened to sap her resolve. Would she falter when confronted with opposition? As doubts mingled with determination, Emily understood that she'd stumbled into uncharted territory. This was her chance to assert not just her professional capacity but her identity. At that moment, she recognized the empowering symbiosis between ambition and collaboration. The meeting concluded, leaving the air thick with a complex mix of resistance and excitement. Robert lingered, his furrowed brow indicating he was still dissecting the session. "You handled yourself well, Emily," he noted, a mixture of admiration and caution in his tone. "But remember, every change demands careful calibration. Next, you'll need to convince those in the boardroom. Can you do that?" The gravity of his question forged clarity. This was about more than simple validation. It would test her limits, both personally and professionally. "Absolutely," she replied, a fierceness igniting within her. As she left the conference room, Emily could already feel the momentum building. What remained now was her meeting with the board of directors, a critical crossroads that would determine the direction of her fledgling career and the depth of her commitment to her vision. As she approached the boardroom door, a thought struck her with visceral force. This could either be her defining moment or a swift rebound into her past. Would she harness this opportunity or allow uncertainty to suffocate her ambition? The answer awaited her beyond that door, and she had never felt more ready to confront it. Emily stood before the boardroom door, the weight of expectation pressing against her chest. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the handle, summoning a sense of calm from within. This was not merely a presentation, it was a pivotal moment where ambition and potential collided, where her voice could either resonate or fade into obscurity. As she entered, the polished room glinted under the fluorescent lights, a circular table gleaming with the promise of power and influence. The board members glanced up from their papers, their faces an array of reaction, some curious, some indifferent, a few skeptical. It was a battleground of intellect and strategy, and Emily suddenly felt the sharp contrast between her previous role and this moment of authority she claimed for herself. "Thank you for being here today," she began, steadiness in her tone, even as her heart thudded loudly in her ears. "I believe that with the proposed merger, we can not only expand our market reach but also redefine our values as an organization. I'll lay out a plan that emphasizes growth through collaboration and transparency, key pillars of trust that resonate with our stakeholders." Her voice rang out, carrying a blend of confidence and urgency that surprised her. The first question came almost immediately from a board member known for his staunch conservatism. "Emily," he said, his brow furrowing, "how do you propose to mitigate potential backlash from long-term partners who might resist or feel threatened by these changes?" Emily felt the air grow thick as she prepared her response. She had anticipated this, and the dialogue began to shift from mere presentations of opinions to more profound inquiries. By initiating open channels of communication, we can strategically engage those stakeholders early. If we align their interests with our own vision, we can turn potential resistance into powerful allies. The board members nodded, intrigued but still cautious. One of the female executives leaned forward, a hint of skepticism evident. "Engaging stakeholders sounds ideal, but what concrete steps will you take to ensure these discussions happen effectively?" That was at a moment of vulnerability and opportunity. Deep in her mind, the thoughts morphed into a plan. "I propose to implement a feedback loop that brings key stakeholders into the fold through regular briefings, ensuring no one is left in the dark. Additionally, we set up advisory panels, enabling them to share their insights which will integrate into our strategy as we move forward." As the conversation began to flow, Emily felt a surge of empowerment. Questions led to counterpoints, each exchange fueling her determination. She deftly navigated each critique, using her training and the insights she'd gained from her experiences in the team meeting. Venturing past her previous anxieties, she threaded her words with narrative element stories of past resistance that ended in positive outcomes, weaving a tapestry of possibility. Yet, with each success, a darker shadow lingered. In the back of her mind, she grappled with insecurities, the fear of failing to deliver considerately and effectively. Would this extended vulnerability offer her undoing, or would it deepen the connection she forged with this table of titans? At some point, the table's collective energy shifted, skepticism cracked open to curiosity and, ultimately, cautious optimism. She read the room, noting as heads began to nod synchronously. Paradoxically, the more she spoke, the more she felt the fracture of the old Emily, the one that operated from the sidelines, hesitant to stake her claim. The new Emily, emboldened and assertive, slowly emerged, but the path felt threading, uncertain and branded with questions of self-worth. As she concluded her presentation, leaving the final hook dangling in the air, one question remained: had she succeeded in laying a foundation for her vision, or was this merely the beginning of a much deeper devotion to embodying this newfound self? The board members exchanged looks, murmurs of approval began to rise, yet tension still pulsed beneath the surface. The tension in the room thickened, lingering doubts mounted that she could not yet shake off. The president of the board finally broke the silence, his voice deliberate. "Your proposal is intriguing, Emily. We will take it under review, but I have to ask, are you prepared for the fallout if your vision faces opposition?" Emily's breath caught at the direct challenge. The unvarnished reality of her ambition hung in the air, binding her heart to a raw truth. Following through would mean leaning entirely into her new identity as a leader. More than prepared, she asserted, fighting the instinct to allow doubt to surface. I will embrace the challenge to ensure this vision becomes a reality. The question is, are you ready to support that journey? The door to her future stood barely ajar, yet the path forward came with both daunting responsibility and exhilarating potential. As she left the boardroom, a tremor of uncertainty lingered. What awaited her beyond this threshold, and how much of herself would she need to give to meet it head-on? The stakes had never been higher, and she found herself poised on the edge of transformation, wondering how far she would be willing to go to claim her place. The soft click of the boardroom door closing behind her was both a release and a trap, an end to the pressure cooker of expectation and yet a reminder that the real challenge had only just begun. As Emily stepped into the stark fluorescent hallway, she felt the energy of the room clinging to her skin, a residue of intensity that pulsed through her. The murmurs of the board followed her, echoes of approval laced with lingering doubts. Would they rally behind her, or would her proposal serve only to deepen the fissures she strove to heal? With each step towards her office, the adrenaline ebbed and a cascade of uncertainty flooded in. Emily felt the weight of her ambitions, a tangible force that settled like a stone in her gut. She reached her desk, taking a moment to breathe, to collect her thoughts. The plan existed, the foundation had been laid. But how could she ensure it flourished without being crushed underfoot? She stared at her laptop, its screen illuminating the path she had just begun to carve. The mere act of inputting her thoughts, of articulating plans and objectives, felt laborious but somehow freeing. Each word she typed was a testament to her evolution, a record of the battles fought and the uncertainty embraced. Yet with every tactical measure, her mind retreated to the shadows, probing questions that undermined her determination. What if the board decided against her? What if the existing networks fully resisted her integration? What if she had miscalculated the pulse of the industry? She tentatively slid her fingers across the keyboard, but confidence wavered, fraying her focus. Emily knew that if she were to truly step into the role of a leader, she needed to embrace the discomfort. She considered how transparency, the core of her proposal, also applied to her ability to communicate her fears and vulnerabilities. What if she invited the board members to join her in discussions not just as authority figures, but as collaborators? They had their own reservations, their own jaded experiences, and perhaps opening a dialogue was the bridge she needed. She opened a fresh document, her heartbeat echoing in the silence of her office as her thoughts flowed onto the page. In the coming weeks, I want to set up a series of roundtable discussions, she wrote, her hands finding a rhythm, to explore our collective concerns and aspirations for the merger. By confronting potential resistance together, we can create a united approach that resonates with our stakeholders and ensures buy-in from all parties. The notion was exhilarating, a roadmap that transformed a surface-level initiative into a movement of shared purpose. Yet, a knot formed in her stomach. Was she overstepping? This was meant to illustrate strength, a sign of good leadership, but what if it backfired? As impatience began to overwhelm her, Emily paced the room, channeling restless energy into a mental rehearsal. She envisioned the discussions with the board, the hope to emphasize dialogue over directives. A part of her winced at the possibility of being dismissed, but an undeniable spark ignited within her. This was her opportunity to truly lead, to redefine what leadership meant in this often rigid environment. With newfound resolve, she leaned toward the grace of vulnerability. She would share her uncertainties alongside her plans, inviting collaboration while exposing herself to criticism. It felt raw and authentic, reversing the facade often adopted in corporate structures. In this opening, she envisioned a revolution of sorts, a way to build a culture of openness. Just as she resolved to send the email, a knock interrupted her thoughts. It was Laura, her assistant, with a stack of papers. "You were fantastic in there, Emily," she said, her eyes glinting with admiration. "The board is still talking about your proposal." The compliment struck Emily. She hadn't considered the board members' perspectives, hadn't realized that even in their skepticism lay an ember of potential. "Thanks, Laura," she replied, a small smile breaking through her earlier tension. I think I'm going to push forward with something a bit unconventional. More than just a plan, I want to foster a dialogue." As Laura nodded, Emily saw glimmers of understanding reflected back at her. This was less about her idea and more about the course correction they could embark on as a team. But just as she began to feel momentum, a text alert flashed on her phone. Glancing down, her breath caught again. A message from the board president. "We'd like to discuss the implications of your proposal further. Can you meet in an hour?" The stakes were escalating, and the real battle loomed ahead. Would her willingness to be transparent reshape the board's perception, or would it unveil deeper rifts? With a mix of anticipation and dread, Emily squared her shoulders. She had come too far to retreat, and now was the moment to solidify her place. But unfolding conversations awaited that could either fortify her resolve or shake its very foundation. How far was she truly willing to go to shape her future, and would the board rally behind her vision as she hoped? Emily's heart raced as she made her way to the boardroom again, the polished floor reflecting the fluorescent lights overhead like a spotlight zeroing in on her. The reality of the meeting loomed, a mix of unfurling possibilities and sharp-edged fears. She could envision the board, their faces a mosaic of skepticism, curiosity, and, hopefully, some degree of support. Each step felt heavy, steeped in the gravity of what was at stake not only for her proposal but for the kind of leader she aspired to become. As she entered the room, the tension enveloped her like a thick fog. The board members were already assembled, a mixture of familiar and stern faces watching as she took her seat at the head of the long, rectangular table. 1,000 scenarios played out in her mind, each one ending in a different shade of acceptance or rejection. What if they couldn't see the value in her ideas? "Thank you for joining me today," Emily began, her voice steady despite the turbulence in her stomach. "I appreciate the opportunity to discuss my proposed roundtable discussions." She laid out her vision with the clarity she had spent the night refining, illustrating how the initiative could cultivate collaboration and preemptively diffuse resistance. Yet, as she spoke, a nagging sense of doubt danced at the edges of her confidence. Would they appreciate her efforts to foster dialogue? Or would they view it as naivete? After each point, she faced their expressions, some nodding thoughtfully, others furrowed in concentration. The room was a live wire, and she needed to choose her words carefully. "Emily," the board president interjected after her presentation, his tone measured. "We recognize your enthusiasm, but have you accounted for the existing disenchantment with the merger? Many on the team harbor substantial apprehensions." A weight settled in her chest, an unspoken challenge hanging in the air. The truth was, she had. She had felt the currents of discontent during the initial meetings but hadn't anticipated it would be such a gauntlet to traverse. She paused to collect her thoughts, knowing this wasn't just about defending her proposal, it was a pivotal moment of authentic leadership. "Absolutely, and that's why I propose these discussions," Emily replied, her resolve solidifying into a palpable energy. "We need to address those apprehensions head-on. Acknowledging our challenges is the first step towards unity." The room swelled with murmurs, and for a fleeting moment, she caught expressions softened by consideration. Perhaps she wasn't alone in wanting to create a bridge. Perhaps the very doubts that clouded the room could be the foundation for something meaningful. Sensing a shift, she pressed forward, urgency driving her words. "We're all carrying the weight of this transition. I believe that through transparency and joint dialogue, we can start gaining momentum. We can build a culture where issues are discussed openly rather than simmering beneath the surface." A gentleman across the table with a reputation for being particularly critical leaned in, skepticism etched into his brow. "And how do you propose to manage those discussions if trust hasn't been established?" A moment of silence descended, the kind that felt as though it could stretch into eternity. She had to confront her own unease and the very premise of her proposition. Could sharing her vulnerabilities forge the trust they so desperately needed? "I can set the tone by being transparent about my concerns as well," Emily replied, channeling energy that surged from deep within. "I'm nervous about this merger myself. I know what's at stake. By being honest about my fears, I invite others to share theirs. We create a safe space, which is necessary for true collaboration. A ripple of surprise washed over the board. The thought of vulnerability as a strength was often uncharted territory in their corporate hierarchy, but she felt the tap of potential empowerment resonate within the room. After what felt like hours of silence, the board president nodded slowly. We agree to give your proposal a chance, but we expect progress reports. This will require your full engagement. As relief washed over her, a spark of determination ignited anew. The path was fraught with challenges, she knew that. But this step was key. She hadn't just outlined a plan, she had laid bare her intentions and invited the board members to become co-creators of change. As she exited the boardroom, pulse thrumming with vigor, Emily realized the meeting had shaken the very foundations of her fears and transformed them into fuel for her ambitions. But an unsettling thought began to form: the real complexity of leadership was only just beginning. How would she navigate the intricate dynamics that would emerge during these roundtable discussions? And with a nagging question left unanswered, she gazed out of her office window at the city skyline, a landscape teeming with potential yet shrouded in uncertainty. Little did she know, the next roundtable session would bring formidable challenges that would test her resolve in ways she wasn't prepared for. Would she have the influence to inspire real change? What would happen when her vulnerabilities were laid bare in front of others? The answer was looming, and it would demand every ounce of courage she had. The morning sun broke through the clouds, illuminating Emily's workspace and casting long shadows that seemed to mimic her lingering doubts. She settled into her chair, the weight of the pending roundtable discussions pressing heavily on her. Adrenaline still coursed through her veins from the victory of gaining board approval, but now the enormity of her leadership role loomed larger than ever. Her first task was to connect with the various team members who would be joining her discussions. She quickly realized that building rapport required strategic interaction, something she had previously taken for granted. Nurturing the environment of trust she aimed to create was crucial, but how could she do so efficiently when apprehensions were still thick, like a fog that clung stubbornly to the valleys of a distant mountain? Distracting herself with notes she jotted down post-meeting, Emily glanced at the array of personalities that would soon fill the conference room. Each individual represented a distinct perspective shaped by their experiences within the company. As she observed the names on her list, a familiar anxiety began to creep in. How could she assure everyone that their voices mattered? Determined to confront this challenge head-on, she reached for her phone and began drafting emails to set one-on-one conversations with key stakeholders. She understood that constructing a genuine connection prior to the discussions could foster a sense of safety, offering a foundation on which her initiative could truly thrive. It was not just about the mechanics of hosting a roundtable, it was about opening a dialogue that could lead to collective catharsis. As she typed, a response to her own hesitation began to emerge. She needed to showcase her commitment to the process. By sharing her vision and her fears openly, she hoped to cultivate a culture that celebrated vulnerability. She imagined sharing her own story at the roundtable, drawing on her recent experiences to illustrate that the merger's complexities were navigating waters they all shared. That thought, however, brought another wave of insecurity. What if sharing her uncertainties made her appear weak? What if the very act of establishing rapport emphasized her lack of control? Emily squeezed her eyes shut and breathed deeply, knowing that true leadership was about embracing discomfort. She pressed send, feeling a spark of courage flicker to life within her, a decision that could either illuminate her path or plunge her deeper into uncharted territory. The following days rushed by in a whirl of meetings and preparations. Each conversation reinforced Emily's belief that real change did not spring from top-down directives but rather from cultivating respect and empathy amidst disparate views. As the roundtable loomed, she found herself grappling with the fine line between authority and relatability. On the morning of the inaugural session, an electrifying mix of anticipation and dread coursed through her. As colleagues entered the room, filling every chair with bodies that bore expressions ranging from trepidation to mild indifference, Emily walked to the front and drew a deep breath. She remembered the faces in the boardroom, their skepticism transformed by her willingness to embrace vulnerability. "Thank you all for being here today," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. "I believe in the power of open dialogue, but to foster it, we must first be willing to share not just our ideas but our reservations as well." A hand shot up almost immediately, one belonging to Frank, a seasoned analyst known for his critical perspective. "And what if we don't feel safe sharing those reservations? What if they just get dismissed?" The question struck her like a blow, resonating with her own insecurities. This was the pivotal moment she feared. Would her vision bring people together, or would it fracture the group further? "You're right, Frank," Emily replied, her heart pounding. "That's why I'm here, not just for the sake of our goals but to create a partnership where everyone's voice is valued. Let us guarantee that this space nurtures honesty." But as those words left her lips, doubt swirled within her. Would she succeed in holding that space? With the tension palpable, she recognized a pivotal truth: this was not merely about implementing a program, it was about forging connections that could withstand the tests of vulnerability, dissent, and divergence. How deep were the cracks in their trust? Would the discussions expose them or heal them? As the first roundtable discussion kicked off, Emily's thoughts buzzed with uncertainty. Little did she know that the answers would unravel in unforeseen ways, testing not only her leadership but her understanding of collaboration and courage. And then it hit her: the very act of confronting these fears might reveal something about herself and the team that she had yet to discover. Would they be brave enough to join her? Would she find unexpected allies, or would the walls of resistance prove too high to scale? Time would tell, but she sensed the next hour might change everything. As Emily settled into her chair for the roundtable discussion, the air hummed with anticipation. The familiar faces around the table wore expressions of varying apprehension and curiosity. She took a moment to reflect on how far she had come, from standing on the outskirts of these conversations to now leading them. "Thank you all for gathering," she began, her voice steady, echoing against the stark walls of the conference room. "Today, I want us to share not just our insights on the merger but also our hesitations and how we envision our roles in this transition." Frank, who had previously voiced his doubts, leaned forward. "It's nice to hear that, but what if our concerns aren't addressed as we hope? What if we're just paying lip service?" Emily met his gaze, feeling the weight of his words. "That's a valid concern, Frank," she affirmed. "This space is meant for genuine dialogue. I've recently learned that transformation starts from acknowledging our fears. Let us face them together. What are we afraid of losing in this merger?" The room fell silent, each participant mulling over their apprehensions. Slowly but surely, hands began to rise. Colleagues shared their thoughts: fear of losing established networks, doubts about the direction of the company, and concerns over personal job security. The dialogue flowed freely, their voices weaving together a rich tapestry of vulnerability and trust. As conversations unfolded, Emily's heart swelled with a sense of belonging she had never anticipated. It was in this collective sharing that she could see the complexities of their sentiments mirrored in her own. For too long, the boundaries of hierarchy had stifled open communication. Now, those walls began to crumble. "I worry that if we rush this merger, we risk alienating our loyal customer base," Carla, a marketing director, interjected. "We need to engage them in our vision and show how it aligns with their needs." "That's an excellent point, Carla," Emily replied, energized by the collaborative spirit igniting the room. "Perhaps we can invite key customers to join us for a feedback session. Engaging them early could prevent backlash and foster strong relationships moving forward." The atmosphere lightened, ideas darting across the room like fireflies. It was exhilarating, and for the first time, Emily felt truly in her element. Each shared concern was met with proactive strategies, and every suggestion unraveled a deeper understanding of their united objectives. As the session progressed, Emily's self-imposed limitations fell away. She became adept at navigating the interplay of voices, embracing the discomfort that sometimes accompanied differing opinions. It was a revelation. Leadership did not mean stepping alone, it meant standing shoulder to shoulder with those willing to forge a path together. After the hour ended, a sense of accomplishment infused the room. They had ventured into uncharted emotional territory together, each member contributing to the greatest tool of transformation, authentic dialogue. As her colleagues filed out, Emily lingered, allowing the gravity of the discussion to settle within her. In the days that followed, the impacts of that discussion reverberated throughout the team. Feedback poured in from various departments, building a constructive momentum that intertwined their voices into a united front. Empowered, Emily sent the suggestions to the board, detailing how her colleagues' insights could shape the merger process. A pivotal moment arrived when the board responded favorably, championing her initiative to involve stakeholders. Emily was invited to present her recommendations to a wider audience, a significant recognition of her growth as a leader. Standing in front of the board, she articulated the new wave of collaboration that birthed from their roundtables. We hold the power to lead with intention by incorporating diverse voices into our strategy. This approach not only mitigates risks but also drives innovation through shared responsibility. As she presented, Emily felt a solid confidence mark her footing, a stark contrast to the knot of uncertainty that had resided in her stomach only months earlier. The board responded with nods of approval, their expressions softened by the authentic camaraderie she had cultivated within her team. Finally, as the meeting concluded, the board president leaned back in his chair. Emily, you've demonstrated an impressive capacity to lead this team through such an important transition. We see your vision not only for the merger but for the future of our culture. In that moment, as the weight of recognition washed over her, she felt the lines separating her father's legacy from her own dissolve. She had forged her identity not only through her courage but through collaboration, the very essence of leadership. With newfound purpose, Emily stepped out of the boardroom knowing she had established her place not just as a capable leader but as a voice that united others toward a shared vision. The road ahead was still filled with challenges, but she held the tools to navigate them. She understood now true fulfillment lay not just in achievement, but in the connections nurtured, the open dialogues created, and the transformative growth experienced together. Emily embraced her journey, a journey where her legacy became a testament to her individuality rather than her father's shadow. Reflecting on her transformation, a quiet sense of pride settled within her. She had done it. She had conquered her fears and emerged, not as a fortune seeker, but as an architect of change, a beacon of courage for those navigating the complexities of their own paths. And in that moment, she realized the power of empathy and authenticity in leadership would pave the way for generations to come. Now, if you've been inspired by Emily's journey of courage and transformation, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help us grow this inspiring community. Comment below what your thoughts were, what resonated with you the most. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion and draw strength from it. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.